Michael Mann, the scientist who devised the now infamous hockey stick climate model, now admits the model was false. Notice how he was not wrong, but the model was wrong. Before the hockey stick was proven false, Mann was happy to accept the fame and notoriety on the model's behalf. Even when computer models routinely fail in their quest to prove the dire consequences of global warming, it does not deter their usage. Computer models are scientific, objective, and above suspicion. If you reject the model, you are a science denier. In highly partisan times, a computer model showing COVID-19 will lead to the death of 2.2 million people serves as the perfect objective source to settle the debate. Big government do-gooders must usurp your freedoms in the name of data. You can't argue with data like you can with chromosomes. The aroma of mathematical calculations orchestrated by brilliant scientists is too seductive for most to resist, while paralyzing to the confidence of any remaining skeptics. But whether it is global warming, coronavirus, or sexism, it does seem strange that the solution to the predictions made by these computer models is always precisely what Democrats wanted to do in the first place. Unlike the computer models, this is not an error. Computer models serve two purposes: to provide the appeal of an unbiased scientific authority by which we must unquestionably accept as gospel, or risk becoming a science denier. The other benefit is that it alleviates decision makers from fault when the model is proven wrong. If computer models can predict an imminent disaster, which the yellow press can leverage for panicky clicks, call that a bonus. To those seeking power, there is no value in a computer model that concludes everything will be fine. Democrats have found computer models as politically advantageous as iterative journalism. Iterative journalism grants the discretion to shape the narrative with lies, provided there is not enough information to falsify them. In the past, error-ridden stories had to be corrected through reprints, which could be costly. The birth of online publishing made updating stories only a few clicks away, so with no financial penalty for reporting hearsay as fact, iterative journalism was born. The Wikipedia page on Russian collusion was mostly lying for years, but under the alias of iterative journalism, Wikipedia was telling the truth at the time. This method gives journalists free rein to libel their opposition and the alibi to get away with it. Wikipedia deceived every reader on Russian collusion for years, and by the time corrections were made, the cement of public opinion had already dried. Mission accomplished. In April 2020, a poll found that 53% of Americans still believe the Steele dossier was legitimate. The fact that most Americans could think this epitomizes iterative journalism's ability to permanently shape public perceptions with falsehoods. However, computer models are no different. After enough revisions, the computer model will eventually turn out to be correct. People will forget about the garbage data, but the freedoms they steal and the precedents they set are here to stay. Mission accomplished. No matter how many times they are proven wrong, computer models will not be going away anytime soon. If the coronavirus models are repeatedly reduced from 2.2 million deaths to 60,000, the creators of the model and its left-wing champions will not be held responsible. When similar predictive models determine a massive need for ventilators in New York and end in the same failure, the faulty model was still useful to attack Trump for 2 weeks. Computer models that enable cheat-by-mail voting and green energy mandates are the best kind of models. As an SDS radical once wrote, "The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution." The accuracy of computer models is also not the issue. Computer models that push the revolution forward are never wrong. Despite their unimpressive track record, more decision-making computer models await us in the future. If scientific institutions like the DSM-5, American Psychological Association, and World Health Organization can support the transgender movement and still be considered scientific, then computer models continually getting it wrong won't stain their scientific reputation either. The certainty of knowing what to do or what to say to improve future outcomes is an invaluable asset. Computer models provide an artificial confidence. The algorithms supplant the traditional crystal ball as the preferred window into the future. Elites already possess an undeserved arrogance for their superior wisdom. With the wind of computer models at their back, they have an additional excuse to dismiss all opposition as ignorant, uneducated white men. Computer models sound complicated, and the maze of complexity obfuscates reality enough to give Democrats the necessary breathing room to advance their agenda without resistance and immunity from blame when they're wrong. If the computer model turns out wrong and the disaster never manifests, it must only be the result of the selfless acts by elites who saved us from catastrophe. If the model turns out to be correct, then be sure to listen to the elites the next time their computer model forecasts a crisis, and be more willing to relinquish your freedoms to prevent the next disaster. How could we expect a party of opportunists to resist such a win-win scenario? I'm not suggesting that all computer models are wrong and will never be useful. What I am suggesting is that the only computer models that CNN or the New York Times will promulgate are models that justify subverting American freedoms. Any uncooperative model will be omitted from reports or conveniently be labeled not credible. Next time you see a computer model in the news, proceed with caution.
We're not going to have 2.2 million people die, as Imperial College and Neil Ferguson said. I don't think the Washington modelers would want to go back to their initial data. I don't think the modelers who convinced Gavin Newsom 3 weeks ago to say that by the end of this month, 25 million Californians will have a case of COVID-19, and given the lethality rates, that would imply 1 million are going to die. Or I don't think Mike DeWine in Ohio should have said on March 12th that he thought 100,000 people had an active case, when in fact there were about 100 who had tested positive, maybe 500 that might have had it. But he said it was doubling every 6 days based on his health commissioner or health director's modeling. And that would give us today, 24 days later, 1.6 million Ohioans and probably 40,000 dead. And as I look at the statistics yesterday, they have a little over 100 dead and about 5,000 cases. So there is a downside to modeling. The modeling is we have to be careful that when you make a model, it's not just a construct. It has consequences. And so far, I'm afraid that the media has suggested the consequences are always good, because the pessimist serves two purposes. The pessimist warns us what could happen, and therefore we get a little hysterical and take the necessary measures. And then when he's found to be incorrect, he says, if I hadn't have done it, you wouldn't have taken these measures. And then if he's right, then he's sort of a grim person who was accurate. The optimist suffers a lose-lose situation. If he says the modeler is exaggerating, the data is incomplete, when he's found to be correct, everybody said, yeah, but it was only because of the pessimists that people changed their behavior that made your optimistic assessment possible. And if he's wrong, given life and death, they say to the optimist, well, you're a murderer because you said it wouldn't be this many dead, and because of you, people were not cautious. So we got to keep in mind the psychological landscape that these models are given. There are consequences when somebody tells Western governments that 2.2 million Americans are likely to die. And that had a lot of ramifications. And they didn't do that. Your larger point, 1918, 1957, they didn't, I'm not saying they didn't have the statistical knowledge to make these models or the data retrieval abilities, but they didn't have confidence that they were all knowing, and they didn't have computers and things like that. So they were much more humble about their own data and the ramifications for public policy.